Coin traders, how we doing? What's going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Fantom FTM on that ticker. A little bit of a rebound date for crypto. Starting to see that a little bit out of Fantom as well, but a lot of resistances up overhead. So specifically right now, if we actually want to look at this overall chart and talk about the movement over the last couple of months, specifically once we actually broke and held support on this 12-period EMA, pulled back and actually kicked off this 50, extremely nice run, confirming support on the 12-period once again, and then on the retracement, back tested to the 50, confirmed it as support before putting in the daily lower high. Thereby, once we actually did retrace, setting a new daily lower low. So right now, broke structure of the daily uptrend, and obviously now confirming and probably back testing right now these EMAs as support. Obviously, right now, we're seeing a backtest of the 12-period EMA. And because we know that this is relevant and has been relevant on a lot of these moves here so far, we're going to think that this is going to be a very big point of resistance, especially because if we do look at price levels, very big zone right now from basically current levels about 75 cents all the way down to a previous level of closing resistance coming in at 70.67. So we know that up overhead right now going to be several big resistance points, even looking up overhead before or after that, we're looking at almost 80 cents at 79.51. So that also aligns with these EMAs, which as we can see, we are starting to look for a little bit more of that bearish cross. Now, when we actually talk about current scenarios and setups, we can see that we are breaking into this zone that was previous level of resistance and then also flipped as support. So even if on the current daily candle, we actually stick with a close around this level, that's not necessarily the worst sign because it gives an opportunity to follow through up into the next area of big resistance and also back test this 50-period EMA if in fact we can make a close on top of this 12-period EMA. Now for volume, we're actually not seeing that much volume come in just yet. So we would need to see a lot more of that volume in order to break such a big resistive zone, especially after knocking out and changing this daily uptrend in favor of a bearish pullback. But typically we also know that these type of pullbacks and retracements are also in short impulses. And typically when we do talk about Elliott waves, we do have a little bit of a short impulse on a longer and a much greater, longer uptrend on some of the longer term charts, which we'll look at here in a second. So if we do end up seeing the resistance points hold up and another back test of the potential low, we're obviously looking at a price low coming in for this flush of 56.06. But we notice there's been a lot of buying at that level or above that level anyway. So we know that the closing level of support for the daily is going to come in at 64.63. Below that, if we do look left, big point of closing support at 63.39. So we know that this is a huge level of closing support. So the fact that we haven't broken below this zone yet, very good sign. So if we do see a rejection, we would actually need to see this overall whole area hold. Otherwise, we would be slipping and actually looking at a longer term pullback and retracement, putting in that third impulse on this type of pullback. So that's kind of another reason why we actually need to see a little bit more bullish volume coming in. And obviously we can get a little bit more help from the rest of the crypto space if that narrative does start to shift and flip. Because we know that Fantom and a lot of other altcoins are going to perform independently, and they do need to see a lot of that action across the rest of the crypto space in order to kind of perform themselves. So if we can get a lot of upside, reason to believe that we will be breaking some of these resistances. And so obviously what we really would love to see is the kind of volumes that we saw actually on this run from February up to putting in our current trend high in the middle of March here about a month ago, putting in a high of 122.9. Now flipping over into the 4-day chart here, a few things to talk about specifically. We are looking at a very nice maintaining of exponential moving average support, which is always huge. So after putting in the low back in the fall, having a very, very nice spike in candle that actually blew above these EMAs where we did hold the 26 as a nice period of support before finally breaking above the 50 as well. And then pulling a retracement pullback to actually back test these levels once we actually did in fact get our nice confirmation of a bullish cross and thereby seeing the longer term uptrend still intact, path of least resistance for the longer term still to the upside. So that's why when we do look at big retracements and pullbacks like this, we know that we're still very much in a longer term uptrend. So even if we do see some wiggle room on the shorter term trends and some uncertainty, we know that the big picture is still zoomed out And also now, especially, we still have confirmation of this longer trend. So we have a high, higher low, higher high, pulling back, setting that higher low, and even still actually maintaining the longer term uptrend, especially on top of these EMAs. So where we have a lot of altcoins right now actually breaking that structure on some of the longer term charts, we're seeing Fantom right now, FTM, and it's actually looking very nice because we're having a very nice solid close in between the 26 and 50, in between the 26 and 50, a lot of dip buying. So very nice signs of strength for a lot of these longer trends. And now even if we will actually, let's go ahead and look at technical indicators first, because we can see that we did have very much overbought levels. And the thing that's actually interesting about this too is that we had overbought, and then we also had a higher high in the RSI, higher high in price. Very nice sign for a strong uptrend. But if we actually look at the volumes, a little bit more of a minimal volume scenario and setup than what we actually saw back on the initial run up when we did have our run from the fall, where we did have our low rally from about 18 cents all the way up until putting in the previous trend high at 56.72. So it's interesting that we see this much of a sign of strength and this much continuous upside, and yet we're still seeing a higher high for the RSI. So interesting enough, but it's still a very good sign. And then obviously now do want to look at stochastic RSI, since we are now below the 20 line and going to be scouting this nice bullish cross here, confirming that this is going to be a nice side of support. So even looking at the previous time on this 4-day chart where we were kind of in the same sort of setup, we did end up having our bearish cross, and we could actually end up seeing another leg to the downside. So that's not impossible to kick off this 50, which actually would allow the stochastic RSI to bottom out. But we're not necessarily worried about if your vision and your picture is still focused on the longer term charts. But the point that I do want to get at here is that the last two times we have seen the stochastic RSI at this level, both here on this pullback, we did see the next leg of upside, which was huge, allowing the stochastic RSI to actually push this oscillator back up and the prices as well. So could see a very next good sign out of that and the next leg to the upside. And then even previously, right before we were looking at our fall rally, saw the same sort of thing, nice bullish cross on the stochastic RSI, and that is what led to this very nice upside move. So we know that this is an effective and reliable indicator right now, since it has been proven accurate for the last 3 attempts. Okay, so now I actually want to flip over into the weekly right now. Same sort of thing like we were looking at on the 4-day chart here. Very nice confirmation, especially of this weekly close. So this is actually pretty huge right now, and kind of one of the reasons why the weekly is kind of in control right now. So very nice upside, 3 weeks of sell-off, but we had a very nice lower shadow, a lot of dip buying, and even on the current rally, you can see lower shadow, but the current weekly candle, which closes tomorrow in just over a day, we were expecting inside bars, so obviously nothing here of suspect, and especially if we can finish off with a nice bullish defense on top of this 12-period EMA, would be an extremely nice sign. Then hopefully we would be able to see follow through next week out of the bulls here with a lot of increasing volume, because as you can see, the current candle, not much volume at all from the bulls or just in general. So hopefully see a little bit more dip buying and confirming this trend here. Yeah, so still seeing lots of great things out of the defense of this trend. So low, high, kicking off the 50 period again, and then actually seeing defense of the 12 is just such a good sign, given how much we are actually up right now. So looking at Fibonacci's on this current retracement, since it was kind of significant, a very big pullback, but still defending the 61.8. So a lot of buying that happened on top of that, defending this level. So even since we did have a pullback and a retracement of overall 54%, very much in line with what we saw out of the rest of the altcoin space for a lot of names. But yeah, just like we talked about, defense of 61.8 is extremely good, especially not being able to see prices run down to 78.6. Definitely a very good sign coming out of that. So even if we do want to look at from the trend low where we actually started back in the fall, very nice defense still coming in above 61.8%. And then obviously maintaining a closing level of support on top of the 50% retracement as well. So now we got to talk about the supports and resistances right now on this weekly. You can see if we were looking at very, very big support and resistance coming in here right at the close, which was 56.83. So looking left, previous point of weekly closing resistance for the price level, and then now 2 attempts and pullbacks, which also align with this 26 period EMA, right at 56.83. So very strong level of defense. And that's why we think that, especially after kicking off such a level, especially after this big retracement, we know that this is probably going to be a pretty strong bottom indicator coming in here. And that's why we are going to expect, especially since now we're looking at closing weekly support at 71. Huge zone for that. So just looking at the weekly lower shadow here, know that that much dip buying is coming in, defending that whole zone. So that's because we have a greater size zone for that support. We know that it does mean that much more strength and that much more of an indication of a bottom indicator coming in. Overall, though, looking at the kind of big picture from the last rally where we did top out in October of 2021 at a high of 36894, just looking at this, we know that this setup is very much like a lot of the rest of the altcoin space, where we actually have a big sell-off and then a long period of accumulation. Typically, this results in a very nice Wyckoff setup, a Wyckoff accumulation setup anyway, where we do have our setup into a very nice sign of strength. So even if we don't get a new trend high right now, we still could be looking at a potential consolidation in the long term, but for a very nice phase D breakout. So this setup is pretty much exactly what we are wanting and expecting for a very big upside move after a long term and a long period of accumulation, especially after being able to defend this very nice long-term support level down to, on this weekly, about 17 cents. So from current price point of 74.20 up to the all-time high right now, looking at about a 400% gain or a 5x return. Do think there's a lot of potential for Fantom to have a much bigger run and cycle this period, though, especially after what we've seen so far on this short little rally. So do think we could get at least all-time highs and expecting a little bit more out of that from Fantom. So yeah, I think right now expectations, especially if we can see a bottom signal from a lot of the rest of the cryptos, is confirmation of some of these resistance sitting sideways and then finally being able to break above these big resistance zones. And then also then flip the daily exponential moving averages back in favor, confirming them as support before regaining enough opportunity to actually see further upside moves. Like we said, though, if the weekly does in fact consolidate, then that would actually put us into a little bit more of a long-term sideways pattern, which wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing, especially because, like we talk about, when we actually rally up and sit sideways, this confirms a very nice period of not only support, but then also confirming this resistance also means support on the way back down if in fact we do retrace. So always a good sign to kind of sit and chop sideways for a little bit, because from a technical standpoint, we are confirming this level as a very big and nice zone of support. Okay, so with that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up the video and the show today on Fantom FTM on that ticker. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet to stay updated on all types of crypto content like this. Make sure to post all of your questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down below in the comments sections. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Don't forget to drop me a follow over on Twitter or X at coin_trades. Looking forward to chatting with everyone over there. That is it for now, though. So do appreciate all the continued love and support. As always, it does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I will catch you back in the next video. Peace.